give us a sense of what something is off in that house, even if it is a vague sense of something being creepily off. Okay. Why don't we start with Melany offering feedback to Stacey on his piece today?
So this is interesting. Biscuit is a fascinating character to me, so I'm enjoying seeing where this is going. I was wondering about halfway through this chapter if this was being told from present day Biscuit, or if possibly it was being told in the moment it was happening in 1953. I think midway through the chapter, I came to the conclusion it was probably being told from like later Biscuit retelling it. But initially, I wasn't 100% sure about that. I really love the conversational tone of how she talks. It just allows you to use some interesting quips and asides. Also, you really do nail the small Midwestern town thing, like the taverns. Like, yeah, anyone from a small town just totally gets that. So the one question that I was thinking about on page 1, and really it's the arc of the whole chapter, is her getting in trouble for writing about the Soviet Union. And I think that this whole story really gets at her character that, affects the whole story as I understand it. And what I was wondering about her, like as a teenager, it's interesting to me that she would, first of all, be reading a newspaper and that she would take an interest in this specifically. And it seems like from what she says later that she knows that this would be a risk to write a paper taking the position that she takes. And so I'm wondering about the why behind that, because I think it's really fascinating. And it reminds me of your opening chapter where she says, she doesn't believe in swearing, but she doesn't have a problem in killing someone, which to me is what makes her such a memorable character. But I feel like there's a little something that I would like to see clarified to like understand that ideology and the conflict in it. And I was thinking about this today, and I think my aha moment was, I was thinking about Pulp Fiction when the character recites the Bible verse before he kills people. And I think it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, but I think at one point he explains to his partner why he does that, I think. And so what I'm curious about, because I think it's the most compelling feature of Biscuit, but I don't quite understand like how she arrived at that. And it was the same thing with this her writing the story about the Soviet Union. I think it's fascinating, especially in the 50s, for a girl to take this interest, but I'm not sure I 100% understand why. And I would imagine it's very important for your story.
That's actually a really great note. That's an opportunity perhaps lost right now that would be fascinating to explore. Really good point, Melany.
On page, let's see, I think it's page 2. When you were talking about the Malcolm dogs and the whole family was mangy. Again, that vignette, just, I totally understand this town. That's all I have to know. I know this town. Let's see. A little bit further down on page 5, is that you, honey? And she says, welcome to hell. I love that contrast because now I want to find out what's going on. It's really interesting misdirection, which I'm sure is on purpose because I was thinking there was going to be a totally different conflict coming. So I love the way that kind of dripped out through the chapter. I guess it was on page 9 when there's the paragraph that starts, Mom was referring to Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. That's when I thought, okay, this is older Biscuit telling the story. Let's see. And then I seem to say this a lot at the very end of your chapter. I wonder, I would suggest thinking about deleting your last paragraph. I don't know why I like to say that. But I really like ending it with, the second to last paragraph.
Okay.
But I really am fascinated in Biscuit. I think she's such an interesting person. I want to dig into her brain a little bit more and understand what's going on. But I really she's very compelling to me.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Great to hear. Okay. How about you, Alex? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mirror a lot of that. Just so I don't forget, because I don't have a note about it. The last line from the mom, I thought could be pushed a bit, and I'll sort of circle back to that. But Melany's comment makes me think you could actually end with "I ignored the pit of my stomach all day," and make that the last line. Anyway. So yeah, this was good. I really liked sort of the family vibe in this, and had a really nice sense for the mom. She seems very clear to me, and I think partly because she kind of reminds me of my own mom. And yeah, I mean, granted, this is the first chapter I'm seeing, right? My mom is super nice. I really love her. But just from this chapter, she seems super nice and seems like, just a little like she cares too much, and she's a little neurotic, and unsure of herself and so on. Anyway, so but that is something I wanted to sort of come back to also. There's a line, I don't have the note for the page, but where the room is stifling hot, as opposed to the other room next to it, which is always freezing cold or whatever, like this one room that's either too hot or too cold, depending on the season. Love that. Like, that was just, we all have a room in our house like that, where it's like, it's never right. It's too hot summer and too cold winter. And yeah, no, that was the kind of thing where I was like, that just great description. So yeah, I agree with Melany. There's a sort of voice shift in the first 3 paragraphs that's different from the previous chapters, and then different from what comes in the rest of this chapter. There's a lot of fourth wall breaks with the asides to the reader, and it just feels like a very different voice, like she's writing in a diary or something. And I think if it were just a diary entry, that could solve it. You could probably keep all that content and just make it a diary entry, or just cut it and start with it was my final day of high school, and just go from there, which immediately sets you in the scene and puts you in the moment in a really nice way that I think I sort of settled in at that point and was like, oh, okay, now I can go along for the ride, and before that, it just felt like, sort of preamble to the story, which always happens, right? We should all always look for cutting our first and last paragraphs and so on.
I totally agree with that.
They usually warm up, right? And then the
They
last
are.
one, pushing too hard, or or something, right? Like there's, it's always worth looking for those. Mostly, yeah, I think mostly my comments for for Stacey are sort of a couple little just moments here and there. The bank conversation with the neighbor is, I think, could be, like, I think the idea there is that he's creepy. And I think that could be done in 2 lines of dialogue. And then just some description, potentially some memories or thoughts from point of view characters' perspective about what previous instances with him that either felt creepy or were genuinely, um, uh, abusive or like, I mean, we don't know what he did to her, but he clearly did something somehow, or she's just kind of creeped out by him. And I'm not sure which, and I kind of want to know which one is it. Like, did he actually do something to her previously, or was it just that he's kind of this creepy neighbor guy, but in the 50s, the trigger for that is much longer than it is today. So it felt to me like she has a genuine reason for wanting to get away from him as soon as possible. But I think it can be done really quick, and it doesn't need all the dialogue. It can just be done in a little bit of description, her thoughts, memories, whatever, and just 1 line or 2 from him is enough. Given today's triggers, to be like, okay, I get, I know who this guy is. Okay, yeah. And then the hell moment with when Biscuit gets home, and sort of we're previewed with, all right, welcome to hell. I was expecting like awful, I was really like, I was like, okay, I'm worried about what kind of abuse, neglect, what does this house look like, and what are her parents gonna, how are they gonna treat her, and then her mom's super nice and like kind of like cooking her food and really worried about her schooling and what, like how she's doing and really engaged, and I was like, oh, I don't know, this seems like a pretty nice suburban white upbringing to me. I don't know, like, so I was like, if my only thought was that it's ironic that Biscuit's thinking it's hell when objectively it isn't, and her point of view about why this is so terrible for her is the point. If so, I need a lot more of her sort of interpreting the situations that objectively from the outside look like pleasant middle class upbringing, with a kind semi-neurotic mom that Biscuit just can't stand, like that, that's the thing that sort of sets her over the edge or whatever. Obviously, because this is the first chapter in the past before we meet her previously in prison, what we're looking for as a reader is, why did she go to prison? Like, this chapter is the beginning of that setup of like, what's so wrong with her life that she killed somebody and then spent 14 to 15 years in prison. And from this chapter, I basically got like, oh, she had a really nice upbringing, a little creepy neighbor. Maybe he's the guy she killed. I don't know. That's my only thought, so definitely more of her perspective about why she hates her life, why she hates her neighbor, why she hates her mom, why, because for all intents and purposes, I was like, this is okay, like, and then, is she a communist? Like, I sort of generally thought, like, is she sort of a burgeoning, she's writing about the Soviet Union because she's kind of like, I like these ideas. I read a bit of Marx and he's really cool and all this. And there's, like, I don't know, this sort of, like, I don't know, it sounds like a utopia. There's no money. Everybody has everything taken care of. It sounds wonderful to me, right? So I'll write about it, right? Whether that's true or not, I definitely want to know that too. Like, what is her political stance? And clearly 53 was the height of the, the height of the McCarthy stuff, and that was just about to really ramp. And so it's a good moment for that conflict to happen politically too. And then my last little comment was on, in the middle of page 2, just some order of presentation that I think easy fix and would make all the difference. So after the line break, there's a couple short paragraphs that give us kind of the character's point of view about what things are, but it's a bit contradictory because she's like, this day on one level should have been a great day, but it wasn't. And then the very next line is, it's the most beautiful day I can remember. Maybe that was a typo or something, which I totally get. Anyway, they sort of conflicted with each other. And I think either way, start with the scene. As I neared home, the little puppy ran off, and keep us in the scene. And then if necessary, once that scene has sort of resolved, if you need to describe her point of view about, like, is it a good day, is it a bad day, or whatever, the scene in theory should settle that. And if it didn't, then you can give a little bit of a, sort of, no, this is I was not having fun this day. This is the worst day of my life, or this is the best day of my life, or this is a really confusing day, or whatever. Just to confirm for the reader, like, okay, yeah. The reader's like, oh, that's what I'm sensing, and then you could just sort of confirm it with the last line of the paragraph, kind of thing. And then there were a couple just things I think that don't really need to be there. Just a couple really core. I used to babysit for them several years ago. Used to implies several years ago, so you can just say I used to babysit for them. And then I jumped. I hadn't seen Mr. Wesley. I think whether she jumped or not, I don't know. I don't know her well enough, and I don't understand the situation well enough to understand why a very strong reaction like that, a huge physical reaction, would happen. So I hadn't seen Mr. Wesley. Just start with that. And then the very next dialogue line, yes, I suppose it is. I've been realizing that the yes and no response, the direct response, isn't necessary, and you can just go to I suppose it is. And then the yes and no sort of end up becoming sort of procedural, and it's better just to cut to the content of the dialogue rather than the polite exchange bit, and then just simply go right to the content of what the person's trying to describe. And not all the time, obviously, there's exceptions to everything, but yeah, this is really great. I need to jump back in time and just see what what the world was like for her as an 18-year-old, as opposed to after being in prison for all this time. And definitely a different character, which it should be, and more naive, which she should be. But it's neat to learn how this all sort of developed.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Pam, thoughts?
Sorry.
My biggest issue here, I guess, was staying consistent to Biscuit's character, in that when we first meet her in the opening scene, she seems to want to be very polite to her neighbor. And when she gets home and she meets Mom, you set the scene by she's nervous, but then she gets a little cheeky, like, Mom, going to the bathroom, and Mom. So it seems like she's not afraid to be bold. And that sort of contradicts with, is she afraid to tell her the news, or is she willing, or is she being sassy? Because if you've got this big news that you're afraid, I don't know how sassy you'd be with Mom to put her in that state. That was my biggest thing. And I think staying true to keeping the reader in that tension of the moment. She is afraid to tell her parents that although she's going to walk at graduation, she hasn't really graduated. And that I lose that a little bit as the scene strays here or there. I think that Alex is comment about tightening the language will also streamline the focus of the chapter to allow that tension to build. Because if she says, and I do agree with that line, welcome to hell, hell doesn't really materialize. So maybe just dropping that off. If you leave with her emotional, that she's sitting with a pit in her stomach before she opens the door, that's enough to raise anticipation and apprehension. And I think you want to keep that throughout this chapter. I did agree, I flagged that same line that Alex flagged about the contradiction. It was the best day, it was the worst day, something like that. And the only other thing I wanted to say was at the beginning, when she leaves Mr. Wesley, she says her sisters are coming. Well, they never show up until the very, very end. So I kept going, where are the sisters? And she tells Mom, they're right behind me, but they never come in. So I kept thinking the sisters should come in at some point. So I just want to kind of track that for timeline wise and figure out where should sisters come in, even if they run through the kitchen into their bedrooms or something. Because I'm going, why aren't they there yet? It's been 20, 30 minutes and she just saw them.
One thing that's really important, Stacey, is that if people are reading this wrong, your audience, from the beginning, that's not a good thing. It's different having twists and turns, but I do feel that you need a few breadcrumbs in this chapter. And I think that means that you need to give us a sense of what something is off in that house, even if it is a vague sense of something being creepily off. Okay. And I also believe that I don't really know what purpose the neighbor serves. I have never seen the purpose for him. I don't know how he's a foil for her. I don't know how he really represents the town in terms of the attitude any more than any of the other characters. So I will mention that to you. So we need a hint of why she doesn't want to come home. I think you mentioned it once that, that her mom could fly off the handle, but there needs to be a little bit more. There needs to be an unease that we feel. We don't feel any of that. And I really question the neighbor's function. So I just wanted to leave you with that. And
Okay. Sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bardsy delivers the tools, guidance, and support you need to produce compelling novels. Our well-researched and thoroughly tested approach includes our minimum complete story, a 90-second exercise that keeps your writing on track while fueling creativity. Bardsy Publishability Index, a 23-dimension checklist that offers attainable goals and provides actionable feedback. And our brand new comprehensive character developer that helps you construct unforgettable characters. Come see for yourself at Bardsy.com today. Try our workshop or enter our first chapter contest. Then, when you're ready, Elite Membership delivers writing groups, personal coaching, and a curated community. With Bardsy, your work will captivate everyone, from agents to publishers, and, most importantly, your readers.
I think there's something really important here I wanted to underline that Alex is saying. There's such a great opportunity with his Alzheimer's to show how expectations are being subverted for her with her father. Sometimes it's the same old, oh my God, you've said this a million times. And then sometimes that's absent. And there's an opportunity to show the subversion of these expectations in a way that really provides even more depth to what's going on. Does that make sense, Melany? Okay, go ahead, Alex.